usually when we talk about a corporate audit, there's this expectation of absolute, almost engineering level precision.
Oh, totally.
Like you look at the bank accounts, the balance sheet shows a very specific number, and the financial auditor just points at the ledger and says, there it is. The money is accounted for, or, it's missing, it's clean.
Right. And it's incredibly comforting. We like things to be visible, to be perfectly categorized in a spreadsheet. I mean, it makes the chaos of running a complex business feel controllable.
But then you step into the world of data protection and privacy compliance, and suddenly that spreadsheet is just completely broken. We are looking at a regulatory landscape that is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Very muddy. You can't just count data the way you count currency, but the liabilities are becoming, well, just as massive.
Okay, let's unpack this. I was recently going through the transcript of a really fascinating virtual town hall meeting that took place on April 27th. And it was hosted by a newly formed group called the Association of Independent Data Auditors of India, or AIDI.
Right. And on the surface, a virtual town hall about data auditing sounds like, the cure for insomnia.
Yeah, it really does.
But what is actually happening in the pages of this transcript is the real-time birth of a brand new, highly lucrative, and legally mandated profession.
Exactly. We're looking at a dense conversation featuring veteran Indian data protection experts, people who have been pioneering this space for decades, plus the CEO of this new association, and even former government officials who oversaw data protection at the Ministry of Information Technology.
And for you listening, whether you are an entrepreneur building a startup, a tech professional navigating the new digital economy, or just an everyday citizen wondering who is actually guarding your personal information, this is crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
Data compliance is about to become as heavily scrutinized as filing your taxes. What this transcript reveals is the hidden plumbing being built right now to support an incoming tidal wave of regulation.
But to understand where we're going, we really have to look at where this all started. The speakers in the town hall traced the roots of this movement all the way back to 2006, which just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, 2006, iPhones barely even existed.
The timeline is honestly crazy. Back in 2006, a personal data protection bill was actually introduced in the Indian parliament.
So what happened? Why did it take almost 2 decades to get a real law on the books?
Well, the parliament's term ended and the bill just lapsed. It vanished.
Wow.
Yeah. The experts in the transcript speculate that lawmakers at the time looked at the Information Technology Act of 2008, specifically this provision called Section 43A, and thought, well, we've got this covered.
What was Section 43A doing that made them so confident?
It was a very narrow mechanism, really. It basically said that if a corporate body handles sensitive personal data and their negligence causes wrongful loss or wrongful gain, they have to pay compensation.
So it was completely reactive.
Exactly. You only worry about it after a disaster happens and someone actually loses money. Lawmakers figured the threat of having to pay compensation would magically create good security practices.
I'm guessing that didn't work out so well.
Not at all. I mean, it didn't create a culture of privacy. It just created a culture of trying not to get sued.
Right.
The real shockwave, the thing that fundamentally changed the DNA of how India views data, was the Puttaswamy judgment.
Let's pause there, because that gets thrown around a lot in legal circles.
Yeah.
For someone who doesn't follow the Supreme Court docket, what actually happened in that judgment? And why did it matter to the average person?
So in 2017, the Indian Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling that fundamentally altered the relationship between the citizen and the state. They declared that privacy is not just some luxury or a secondary privilege.
Right.
It is a fundamental right guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. It's intrinsic to the right to life and liberty.
Oh, wow. So suddenly protecting someone's data wasn't just a corporate best practice to avoid a lawsuit. It was a constitutional mandate.
Exactly. And that ruling sparked a massive shift toward a true privacy compliance culture in India.
But according to the town hall, the real operational turbocharge, the thing that forced companies to actually start building out compliance departments, came from outside India entirely.
Yep. The 2018 rollout of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, in Europe.
Right.
This was a massive, aggressive European law with global reach, and the speakers detail how this directly triggered the creation of an Indian group called the Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India, FDPI.
So they saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, they looked at the GDPR and realized Indian companies, especially those doing IT services for European clients, were about to get hit by a freight train of compliance requirements.
So what did this foundation actually do? Did they just sit around writing opinion pieces while waiting for the Indian government to pass a new law?
No, and this is where the transcript gets genuinely exciting from an organizational perspective. They didn't wait. They started building their own comprehensive indigenous frameworks right then.
Whoa.
Yeah, they created something called the Data Governance and Protection Standard of India, or DGPSI. And they didn't just build one monolithic, heavy standard. They totally geeked out and created specific versions based on how businesses actually operate.
Give me an example of that. Because usually compliance feels very one size fits all.
Let's look at their HR version. Imagine you run a massive steel manufacturing plant. You don't hold any consumer data, right? You just sell steel girders to construction companies.
Okay, so you might think, I don't need a data protection auditor.
Exactly. But you employ 10,000 people on the factory floor. Every morning, they scan their thumbprint on a biometric attendance machine. You hold their bank account details for payroll, their medical history for insurance, their emergency contacts.
That is a staggering amount of highly sensitive personal data.
Right. Your entire exposure to data privacy laws is solely localized within your HR department.
Oh, that makes sense.
FDPI recognized that reality on the ground and built a specific tailored framework just for human resources. They built a light version for small businesses, and even an AI extension anticipating the rise of machine learning.
But think about the timeline here. You're saying they were prepping these frameworks, running certification programs, and training people starting around 2018. But India's actual current data privacy law wasn't passed until 2023. That is like practicing every day for a marathon for 5 years without even knowing if a race is ever going to be scheduled.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that proactive, almost stubborn preparation is exactly why these speakers are positioned to lead the entire industry now.
They were just ready.
They operated on the principle of compliance by default. They assumed that if you build robust, ethical data structures early, whatever law eventually passes, you'll already be 90% of the way there.
And that ties into a really fascinating organizational philosophy discussed in the town hall. One of the veteran experts, Mr. Naavi, describes how they structure their efforts using the metaphor of a banyan tree.
Which is such a uniquely beautiful way to visualize a corporate ecosystem.
Yeah. For those who might not have seen one, a banyan tree grows in a very specific way. It drops these aerial roots from its branches all the way down into the soil. And over time, those roots thicken and become indistinguishable from the main trunk.
Right.
So instead of one massive, centralized tree hoarding all the nutrients and snapping in a storm, it spreads out. It creates a forest of interconnected, supporting trunks that can weather anything.
And that was the blueprint for FDPI. They didn't want to be a monopolistic consulting firm guarding all the secrets.
Yeah.
They trained professionals, gave them the tools, and encouraged them to put down their own roots, to start their own independent audit organizations across the country.
This is huge.
This new group hosting the town hall, AIDAI, is essentially the latest and most ambitious branch of that banyan tree.
Which brings us to the absolute centerpiece of this deep dive. The thing that's going to keep CEOs awake at night. We finally have a law in India, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023, the DPDPA. And the town hall focuses heavily on one specific game-changing part of it, which is Section 10.
Section 10 is the earthquake that is currently reshaping the industry. In plain English, the law says that if your company processes a massive amount of data or highly sensitive data, you might be designated as a significant data fiduciary. An SDF.
Okay.
And if you are an SDF, you are legally mandated to conduct comprehensive annual audits. Here's the catch. You cannot use your internal IT team. You have to hire an external independent data auditor.
Okay, stop right there. The million-dollar question for any business owner listening is, how do I know if I'm a significant data fiduciary? Is the government going to mail me a letter? Is there a master list published online?
That is the brilliant and frankly terrifying part of the structure. The speakers in the source point out that the government sitting in New Delhi has absolutely no idea what the internal day-to-day risk profile of a random mid-sized tech company looks like.
So they don't know who has the data.
Exactly. So no, there likely won't be a neat top-down list handed out.
Wait, hold on. So companies are supposed to evaluate themselves. They have to look at their own data volume and decide, yes, we are highly risky. Please send in the strict external auditors.
Isn't that the literal definition of asking the fox to guard the henhouse? Like, why would any company voluntarily raise their hand for that kind of scrutiny?
Because the penalty for guessing wrong and trying to hide is catastrophic. And the speakers point out a massive trapdoor built into this self-evaluation. It's not just about volume. It's about the type of data.
What do you mean?
The town hall experts argue that if your company uses biometrics, like our factory floor example with thumbprint scanners,
or if you use any kind of artificial intelligence to process customer data to predict their behavior, you should automatically consider yourself an SDF.
wow. So because the risk profile of AI is still so wild and unpredictable, just touching AI immediately bumps you into the highest risk category.
That's the argument.
By that logic, almost every modern company trying to stay competitive in India is going to be slapped with this significant data fiduciary label.
And every single one of them is going to need to hire an independent data auditor.
To explain what this new auditor actually does, one of the speakers used a great analogy. He compared the auditor to an ADS, an advanced driver assistance system in modern cars.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, he says the auditor's there to constantly monitor the company and say, hey, you're drifting out of your compliance lane, you're speeding with this new data collection tool, you need to course correct before you crash.
It paints a very clear picture of the preventative nature of the job.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I was looking at the actual legal requirements they discussed later in the transcript, and I think we need to dramatically sharpen that car analogy.
How so?
Because an AIDAI just beeps at you. It flashes a little coffee cup icon on your dashboard. But according to Section 10, if these new independent data auditors spot significant noncompliance, they don't just hand a report to the CEO.
Right.
They are required to report directly to the Data Protection Board.
The external government-appointed regulatory body.
Yes. And that board has the power to issue fines of up to 250 crore rupees. Let's be clear. That is not a beeping dashboard. That is having a literal traffic cop sitting in your passenger seat, holding a radar gun, with a direct open radio line to the chief of police.
That is a phenomenal distinction, and it perfectly highlights the staggering power shift occurring here. Historically, if a company hired someone to do an ISO security audit, it was internal housekeeping.
Yeah, just checking boxes.
The auditor found a vulnerable server, handed a report to the management team, and said, hey, try to patch this by Q3.
The company held all the cards.
Precisely. But this direct reporting line to a government board with the power to issue 250 crore fines, the experts point out that this legally elevates the independent data auditor to the level of a statutory financial auditor.
Or a company secretary who is legally bound to report financial fraud.
Exactly. They are no longer IT consultants giving friendly advice. They are operating in a completely different high-stakes orbit. They are the legal guardians of consumer trust.
Which is an incredibly powerful position. But listening to this town hall, it becomes obvious that this creates a terrifying math problem for the entire country.
The looming talent crunch.
Yes, the speakers project this law will be fully operative by mid-2027. If every company touching AI or biometrics is suddenly an SDF, we're talking about tens of thousands of companies needing independent audits every single year.
It's massive.
And we do not have tens of thousands of qualified data auditors sitting around waiting for the phone to ring.
No, we don't. And what's fascinating here is how AIDA plans to solve this impossible math problem. They realize they can't just train a few hundred people from scratch.
So what's the plan?
Their master plan is to send out a bat signal to massive, disparate talent pools that already exist in other industries.
They are targeting existing ISO lead auditors, sure, but they're also aggressively recruiting chartered accountants and cost accountants, which threw me off at first.
Yeah, why would a cost accountant, someone who spends their life looking at supply chain margins and manufacturing costs, be auditing data?
Right.
Because, as the transcript makes clear, assets have fundamentally changed. Your company's bank balance is data. Your intellectual property is data.
That's true.
Therefore, data valuation, the act of assigning a literal defensible financial value to the data a company holds, is becoming a critical accounting function.
Okay, so you are bringing in tech geeks, cost accountants, and lawyers. How do you actually organize that? AI outlined a 3-tier system to categorize all this talent.
Yeah, let's break that down.
So they have a top tier for veterans who pass brutal exams and a middle tier for professionals crossing over from other fields. But it was their entry-level tier that really stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the probationary tier.
Yeah. They call it the Probationary Independent Data Auditor. And it is explicitly designed for freshers with zero experience. The fee is like 6,000 rupees. While the veterans paid 10,000 for their certification.
I know what you're thinking. It seems incredibly counterintuitive, right?
I mean, Yes.
Yeah.
You just told me this is a high-stakes role with a direct line to a government board that can drop 250 crore fines. Why on earth would you put a 22-year-old with zero privacy experience anywhere near this?
Because they aren't leading the audit. They're the engine room. Think about the sheer volume of daily granular checks required for a massive tech firm to stay compliant.
It's a lot of paperwork.
Exactly. A chief data protection officer can't manually review 10,000 consent forms or check every single vendor contract. They need a team of 15 assistants grinding through the operational checklists. By bringing in freshers, AIDA is building that necessary secondary layer of support staff.
The speakers also pitched this as a massive alternative career path for junior coders who are currently watching their jobs get automated away by AI.
Yeah, which is a brilliant silver lining.
But it raises a practical question. So you've successfully recruited an army of freshers, accountants, and IT veterans. If I am the CEO of a mid-sized e-commerce company, how do I actually find the right auditor for my specific business? Is there a yellow pages for this?
That is the exact logistical nightmare the CEO of the association, Vijendra Shenoy, addressed. His mantra during the town hall was collaborate, collaborate, collaborate.
So they are building something.
Yes, to solve the matchmaking problem, they are building a massive SaaS, software as a service, data exchange platform, and they are targeting a launch later this year, around December.
So it's essentially a high-end, highly secure matchmaking service for data compliance.
Exactly. A company subscribes to the platform, inputs their risk profile, manages their compliance lifecycle, and gets matched with the exact auditor they need.
Whether they need someone heavy on legal expertise, technical cybersecurity, or financial data valuation.
Spot on. And their ambitions don't stop there. They are planning a phase 2 for this platform that includes a grievance redressal system.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a consumer feels a company misused their data. Instead of immediately going to court, there would be a centralized platform to voice that dispute, bringing in legal professionals for mediation. It is a sweeping vision for a completely self-regulating industry.
You can actually see that ambition perfectly reflected in the visual identity they debuted at the town hall. They spent time breaking down their new logo, which is quite clever.
Oh yeah, the logo design.
It features a law book representing the DPDPA rules, a shield standing for the unyielding trust and protection they must provide, and finally, leaves.
Prosperity, progress, and knowledge. A deliberate nod back to that banyan tree philosophy of sustainable, widespread growth.
It all sounds incredibly optimistic. But the town hall wasn't just a giant victory lap. There was a very sober warning delivered toward the end by Rakesh Maheshwari, the former IT ministry official.
This raises an important question, and it is the elephant in the room for this entire endeavor. The government has passed the law, but they have not yet released a formal, state-backed accreditation scheme for who gets to be an independent auditor.
Right. AIDA is stepping up to fill a massive void, but they don't have a piece of paper from the government granting them a monopoly. They aren't the official, legally mandated governing body yet.
Which means AIDA's entire survival relies entirely on one fragile asset, which is credibility.
Right.
Maheshwari warned them that they have to prove to the market and the government that their training is rigorous and that their auditors have absolute, uncompromised integrity.
Because if a company uses an AIDA auditor and then suffers a massive negligent data breach a month later, the association's credibility is totally destroyed.
Exactly.
And how hard is it to actually maintain that perfect integrity? The town hall ended with a practicing auditor from the audience bringing up the ultimate paradox of this entire profession.
It was a very poignant reality check. He pointed out that true independence is almost an illusion when you look at the mechanics of how business works.
Let me get this straight. You're hired by the CEO. You are paid by the CEO. But your job is to relentlessly investigate that CEO, find out if they're breaking the law, and if they are, report them to the government so they can be fined 250 crores.
It's a tough spot.
How many CEOs are going to happily pay your invoice next year?
It is a structural conflict of interest that is incredibly difficult to navigate. The leaders acknowledged it openly. It requires a level of ethical fortitude comparable to the oath taken by doctors or lawyers.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's exactly why they argue this cannot be a lone wolf profession. A single independent auditor might buckle under the pressure of losing a massive corporate client.
Right.
But an auditor backed by a powerful, unified national association has a shield. They can point to the standard and say, hey, I have to report this, or I lose my accreditation entirely.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. To summarize the core takeaway for you listening, data is no longer just something the IT department worries about on a Friday afternoon.
Not at all.
It is a board-level, legally binding asset. If your company processes data, you are inevitably going to need an independent guardian to audit it. A whole new industry with its own training pipelines, tech platforms, and complex ethical standards is being built from the ground up right now to meet a looming 2027 deadline.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that idea of data valuation we discussed with the cost accountants. We established that data is officially being recognized as a core financial asset, sitting on the balance sheet right next to the cash in the bank and the real estate the company owns.
It has a literal dollar value attached to it.
So consider this scenario. What happens to the global economy when a massive data breach occurs? And the worst result isn't just a hefty regulatory fine. What happens when a breach literally bankrupts a Fortune 500 company instantaneously?
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Imagine their primary asset, the proprietary behavioral data they valued at hundreds of millions of dollars, is corrupted, stolen, and rendered worthless overnight. Its value instantly goes to zero.
It's the equivalent of a massive bank vault being emptied, but it happens invisibly in a fraction of a second.
Precisely. If data is money and the data vanishes, the company is instantly insolvent. So the provocative question you have to ask yourself is, how long until these independent data auditors become vastly more powerful and crucial to global market stability than traditional financial auditors?
Because it's no longer just about checking a compliance box. It's about verifying the literal solvency of the entire digital economy. We started this deep dive talking about how much we love the clean, binary precision of a financial spreadsheet. But as we've seen today, the true immense value of modern business lives in the diagnostic muddy waters of data, and those waters are rising fast.
And you definitely want a good auditor navigating the ship when they do.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.